My whole family skipped my awards ceremony. Even my wife, all of them chose my brother's barbecue party instead. I never thought a single day could make me question my entire place in my own family. But that's exactly what happened the day I received the biggest award of my life, the National Educator of the Year. Teaching had been my calling for over 2 decades. The award wasn't just a plaque and a handshake. It was recognition for all the sleepless nights, the personal money I'd spent on classroom supplies, the after-school tutoring sessions that kept me away from my own family's dinner table. The ceremony was in the city's grand auditorium, a place I'd only seen in passing. When I got the letter inviting me to walk on stage and receive the award in front of hundreds of people, teachers, dignitaries, reporters, I felt like a kid again. Nervous, excited, proud. Naturally, the first thing I did was call my family. Saturday, at 4 p.m., I told them, "It's the biggest day of my career. I really want all of you there." My wife, Laura, was quiet for a second, then said, "Oh, Saturday. That's when your brother is having his big barbecue." "Yes, I know," I replied, already anticipating the conflict. "But this isn't just a backyard meal. This is a once-in-a-lifetime achievement. I've been nominated 3 times before and lost. This year I'm finally getting it." Laura's voice softened. "We'll figure it out, okay? Don't stress." That "we'll figure it out" echoed in my head all week. I imagined them sitting in the audience, my wife, my kids, my parents, maybe even my siblings. I imagined hearing their cheers, seeing them clap as I shook hands with the mayor. But by Thursday, I started sensing distance. My mother hadn't called to ask about the ceremony. My father didn't mention it at all when we spoke on the phone. My kids seemed more excited about Uncle Dan's barbecue than anything I was doing. On Friday night, I decided to address it directly at dinner. "So, tomorrow, are we all driving in one car to the auditorium?" Laura looked at me with a pained expression. "Honey, we talked, and the family's going to dance." It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "All of you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your brother only does this once a year. Everyone already confirmed weeks ago. It wouldn't be fair to cancel." I laughed bitterly. Wouldn't be fair? To skip my once-in-a-lifetime award to eat ribs in his backyard. The kids looked down at their plates. Laura crossed her arms. "Don't make this a big fight. You know how important family traditions are." And that's when I realized, apparently, I wasn't part of the tradition that mattered. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty row where my family should be sitting. I imagined walking on stage, smiling for the cameras, and scanning the crowd for a familiar face, only to find strangers staring back. In the morning, I hoped maybe someone had changed their mind. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. Just a text from my brother, Dan. "Hey man, sorry I can't make your thing, but you should swing by after. We'll have plenty of food." My thing. That's what my awards ceremony was reduced to. By 2 p.m., I was already in my suit, pacing in the living room. Laura and the kids were getting ready too, but for a completely different reason. I watched them load up the cooler with soda cans and bags of chips, chatting about how Uncle Dan's barbecue was legendary. "You could at least come to the ceremony first and then go." I tried one last time. Laura shook her head. "It's over an hour drive to the city, and then we'd have to rush back. The kids want to swim in Dan's pool. Let's not complicate things." Complicate things. That's what my dream day had become, a logistical inconvenience. The drive to the auditorium was quiet. I was alone, with nothing but the sound of the GPS telling me to turn left or right. Meanwhile, I picture my entire family already at Dan's place, the smell of grilled burgers filling the air, laughter echoing through the yard. When I arrived at the venue, the grand steps looked intimidating. People were taking photos in elegant clothes, holding hands, embracing. Inside, the auditorium buzzed with energy. Teachers I'd admired for years greeted me warmly. "Where's your family?" one of my colleagues asked with a smile. I had another commitment," I mumbled, forcing a grin. When my name was called, I walked on stage to the sound of applause. The mayor shook my hand, the flash of cameras went off, and I tried, really tried, to enjoy the moment. But it felt hollow. From a stage, I scanned the audience. Every row was filled with strangers. I could almost imagine my wife's face there, my kids clapping wildly, my parents wiping away tears. But they weren't. They were eating ribs at my brother's house. And in that instant, a small, sharp thought took root in my mind. They'll remember this. I'll make sure they do. After the ceremony, I lingered briefly in the reception hall, shaking hands and exchanging polite congratulations. The warm smiles and sincere praises from colleagues only made the absence of my family sting more deeply. I caught myself glancing repeatedly at the exit, half hoping someone would walk through the door. But no one came. The ride home was quieter than before. My phone buzzed once, a group chat notification. It was from my brother Dan, Laura, and the kids. Dan's message was a photo of his backyard, the grill smoking, a picnic table loaded with food, and a bunch of smiling faces. His caption read, "Best barbecue ever. Wish you were here." I stared at that photo like it was a slap in the face. Wish you were here. Yet none of them had even tried to be there for me. When I got home, the house was eerily empty. I could hear laughter and splashes coming faintly from the neighbor's yard. I checked the clock, 7 p.m. My family had been gone for hours. Laura's voice came through the phone, cheerful and warm. "We're having so much fun. You should see it. The kids love the pool. Dan's ribs are unbelievable. Did you even think about coming to the ceremony?" I asked quietly. There was a pause. Then Laura said, "It's just one event, Tom. And it wasn't even that big of a deal to the kids." I felt my chest tighten. It was everything to me. She sighed. "You're overreacting. Overreacting." That word echoed inside me like a punch. How could the woman I married dismiss the most important moment of my career as not that big of a deal? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I remembered all the times I'd missed dinners, birthdays, soccer games, all sacrifices I'd made to provide for this family and build a future. For what? To be replaced by a barbecue party? The anger that simmered inside me wasn't just about the ceremony anymore. It was about respect, recognition, and the cruel realization that my family's loyalty was with my brother, not me. By the time I finally fell asleep, a decision had settled in my mind. If they wouldn't stand by me when it mattered most, then maybe it was time I showed them why they should never take me for granted again. The next morning, I woke up with a burning determination. I needed to confront this head on, but not with anger or accusations. I wanted to hit them where it hurt, where family pride and reputation clashed with their careless choices. First, I reached out to my parents. My father answered on the second ring. "Dad," I started carefully, "did you come to the awards ceremony?" There was silence. Then, "No, son. We were at Dan's barbecue." "I understand it was important to him," I said quietly. "But this award, it means a lot to me. Did you at least tell Dan you'd be supporting me?" Dad's voice grew defensive. "Tom, we've always been close to Dan. He's our eldest. You know how it is." "Yeah, I know," I said bitterly. "It feels like I'm just the afterthought." He sighed. "It's not like that. We didn't mean to hurt you." "Maybe," I replied, "but the pain is real." After hanging up, I texted Laura. "We need to talk tonight. No distractions." I spent the day crafting a plan. I wasn't going to beg or plead. I was going to hold up a mirror, show them the consequences of their choices. I reached out to my school principal and suggested hosting a community event with the local press invited to celebrate my award and the work I'd done. I planned to invite the entire family, making it impossible to ignore the achievement. At the same time, I started reaching out to old friends and colleagues, people I'd helped or inspired over the years. If my family wouldn't be there, maybe my extended family, the people who truly valued me, would show up. That evening, Laura and I sat down at the kitchen table. I could see the tension in her eyes. She knew this conversation was coming. "Laura," I began, "Saturday was the worst day of my life. Not because of the award, but because of how little I mattered to my own family." She looked away. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill." I shook my head. "No, I'm making a mountain because that molehill broke me." "You're being dramatic." "Maybe I am. But when your own wife chooses your brother's barbecue over your life's biggest moment, that's not just drama. That's betrayal." For the first time, I saw her defenses crack. "Tom, it wasn't supposed to be like this. You have to understand." I cut her off. "No, I understand perfectly. I understand who you really care about." That night, I lay awake, knowing that the battle lines have been drawn. But this war was far from over. The following week was a whirlwind of preparations. The community event I'd proposed took on a life of its own. The principal loved the idea and offered the school auditorium for free. Local newspapers reached out for interviews. Even some city council members expressed interest in attending. Word spread quickly. I saw messages from former students and parents flooding in with congratulations and offers to help. It was a reminder that my impact reached beyond the narrow walls of family drama. But as the event grew bigger, the silence from my family remained deafening. No RSVPs, no texts, nothing. The night before, I sent one final message to Laura. Tomorrow is your last chance to be part of this. No reply. The next day, the auditorium was packed. The crowd wasn't just my colleagues. It was the community I'd served for years. Faces from different chapters of my life smiled and applauded as I stepped onto the stage. As I gave my speech, I looked out, hoping, praying to see my family somewhere among them. But the seats where they should have been sat empty. That absence burned deeper than any insult. After the ceremony, reporters approached me for interviews. The story of the award, my career, and my dedication made headlines. But they also asked, quietly, about my family. I hesitated, then chose honesty. My family. They chose my brother's barbecue over my award ceremony, I said. It's painful, but it's also a reminder of who truly supports me. The interview spread like wildfire. Suddenly, my story wasn't just about a teacher winning an award. It was about family, loyalty, and betrayal. That evening, as the event wound down, I got a call from my mother. "Tom, we saw the news," she said, her voice shaky. "We didn't realize how much this meant to you." "Maybe not," I replied, "but it does now." I realized then that the spotlight I'd stepped into was bigger than I imagined, and that some wounds, even in family, could be healed only with truth and time. The days that followed were a strange mix of relief and tension. The community had rallied behind me, sending messages of support and admiration. Strangers reached out on social media, sharing their own stories of family struggles and triumphs. For once, I felt seen, truly seen, for who I was beyond the role of husband, father, or brother. But at home, things were colder than ever. Laura barely spoke, and the kids avoided eye contact. When I tried to bring up the award or the event, the subject was quickly changed. One afternoon, as I was grading papers, Laura sat beside me and finally said, "Tom, maybe we should try counseling." I looked up, surprised. "Counseling? Yes. To fix this, whatever this is between us." I hesitated. The anger was still there, but so was the love I had for her. "I'm willing if you are." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I don't want us to lose everything." But even as hope flickered, my mind drifted back to Dan, my brother who had stolen the day that was supposed to be mine. I decided I needed to confront him. Not to yell or accuse, but to understand. I called Dan and asked him to meet for coffee. He agreed, sounding casual as ever. When we met, his smile was easy, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of guilt. "Tom, man, I'm sorry about the barbecue thing," he started. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I took a deep breath. "Why didn't you come to the ceremony?" He shrugged. "I thought you wouldn't want us there. You and Mom and Dad have always had your thing." I just figured. "Figure what?" I pressed. "That your award wasn't that big of a deal." His words hit like a punch. "Dan, it was everything to me, and you all made it feel like it wasn't worth showing up." He looked down. "I messed up. I know," I said quietly. "But it's not just about the ceremony. It's about feeling like I don't belong in my own family." Dan nodded, eyes heavy. "I never wanted that for you." As we sat there, the tension began to lift, but I knew this was just the start of a long, painful road to repair what had been broken. The conversation with Dan stirred up more than just old resentments. It opened a door I hadn't dared to unlock before. I realized our family's fractures ran deeper than a missed ceremony or a barbecue. There were years of unspoken grievances, jealousies, and silent competitions simmering beneath the surface. Over the next few days, I found myself reflecting on those past moments, birthdays ignored, milestones overlooked, and the way Dan seemed to glide through life, always the favored son, while I struggled in the shadows. I wanted to believe my brother didn't intentionally hurt me, but the pain was undeniable. The sting of invisibility was a poison I'd carried quietly for years. That weekend, I confronted Laura again, this time with a calmer voice. "We need to be honest with each other," I said. "If we want to move forward, we have to face the truth. All of it." She nodded, tears glistening. "I'm scared, Tom. Scared of losing you." "I'm scared too," I admitted. "But we owe it to ourselves and to the kids to try." We agreed to start counseling the following week, a tentative step toward healing. Meanwhile, my relationship with Dan remained complicated. We began meeting more often, not just to talk about past wounds, but to rebuild a fragile connection. One afternoon, Dan surprised me by inviting me to help him with a community project he'd been organizing, a charity barbecue for a local shelter. "It's not about ribs this time," he joked. "It's about giving back." I saw a side of my brother I hadn't before, one willing to make amends and put effort into repair. Though the scars were still fresh, I realized something. Sometimes, family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. And maybe, just maybe, that's where redemption begins. The charity barbecue turned out to be a turning point, not just for my relationship with Dan, but for myself. The sun was high. The smell of grilling meat filled the air, but this time, the event had a purpose deeper than family rivalries. Volunteers from all over the community gathered to cook, serve, and raise funds for those in need. Dan and I worked side by side, flipping burgers and coordinating volunteers. It was hard work, but it felt meaningful. For the first time in years, I saw my brother not as a rival, but as a partner in something bigger than ourselves. The kids joined in, laughing and helping pass out plates. Laura smiled more freely, her walls slowly coming down. As the day went on, I realized the bitterness I'd been holding was starting to loosen. Maybe forgiveness didn't mean forgetting the pain, but choosing not to let it define us anymore. That evening, as we packed up the last trays, Dan clapped me on the back. "Thanks for giving me a chance." I nodded. "Thanks for trying." Still, even as I felt the healing begin, a quiet voice in my mind reminded me, trust takes time. And some wounds, no matter how much you want to forget, leave their marks. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Saw your story in the paper. Proud of you. If you ever need anything, I'm here." I stared at it for a moment, the unexpected kindness warming a place I thought was permanently cold. Life was messy, complicated, and sometimes cruel, but moments like this made it worth fighting for. That message sparked a curiosity in me. Who could it be? I hesitated before replying, simply writing, "Thank you. That means a lot." The response came quickly. "You don't know me, but I was a student of yours years ago. You changed my life. I wanted you to know that." Reading those words, something I hadn't felt in a long time stirred inside me. Validation beyond blood, beyond family politics. This was real. This was impact. For days, we exchanged messages. This former student, someone I barely remembered, shared stories of how I'd helped him when no one else would, staying late after class, offering advice, believing in him when he didn't believe in himself. It struck me. While my family was busy choosing barbecues over ceremonies, I had built a legacy with people who truly mattered. The contrast was painful but empowering. Around the same time, Laura and I attended our first counseling session. Sitting in that small, sterile room, facing a stranger who gently pushed us to speak honestly, was uncomfortable but necessary. We aired grievances we'd kept bottled for years. The feeling of being taken for granted, the quiet resentment over small betrayals, the loneliness within marriage. It was raw, messy, and sometimes heartbreaking. But it was the first real step toward rebuilding trust. That evening, as we left the office, Laura reached for my hand. "Thank you for not giving up on us." I squeezed her hand back. "Neither am I." Yet, beneath the fragile hope, a question lingered. Could we truly rebuild what had been broken? Or were some cracks too deep to mend? Weeks passed, and slowly, things began to shift. Counseling sessions became a place where hidden emotions surfaced: anger, guilt, regret, but also understanding and empathy. At home, Laura and I started talking again, really talking about hopes, fears, and the silent spaces that had grown between us. The kids noticed a change too, their laughter returning to the house in small bursts, tentative but real. One evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my brother Dan. "Hey Tom, Mom and Dad want to meet up this weekend. They say they want to make things right." I stared at the message, conflicted. Was I ready to open that door again? To face the family that had chosen sides? To confront the wounds that still throbbed beneath the surface? After a long pause, I typed back, "Let's do it." The weekend arrived with a nervous energy. We met at a small cafe, neutral ground. My parents looked older, wearier. Their eyes held a mix of remorse and hope. "My son," my father began, voice heavy, "we were wrong. We let old habits and favoritism blind us to what really matters." My mother nodded, tears glistening. "We missed your ceremony, and we're sorry. More than words can say." I took a deep breath. "Thank you for saying that. But it's going to take time to rebuild what was broken." They agreed, promising to show up, to be present in ways that mattered, not just for me, but for the entire family. As we parted, I felt a cautious hope. Maybe family wasn't about perfection. Maybe it was about forgiveness, effort, and the courage to try again. In the weeks that followed, our family dynamics shifted in subtle but meaningful ways. My parents started showing up at school events, cheering from the sidelines, offering genuine congratulations without distraction. It felt like a fragile truce forming after years of quiet distance. Laura and I continued our counseling sessions, each one peeling back layers of resentment and misunderstanding. We relearned each other, discovering the person behind the roles we'd fallen into. Dan and I's relationship was still tentative, but we kept meeting, slowly rebuilding trust with shared moments like fixing up the community garden or volunteering at the shelter. But just as I began to believe we could move past the pain, a sudden storm hit. One afternoon, I got a call from my sister, Rachel. Her voice trembled as she said, "Tom, I don't know how to say this, but there's been an accident." My heart stopped. "What happened?" "It's Dad. He's in the hospital. It's serious." Rushing to the hospital, I found my mother sitting silently, her face pale and drawn. The doctors explained that Dad had suffered a stroke, sudden, severe, and life-changing. As I sat by his bedside, I realized that the fight we'd just begun to mend might be interrupted by something far bigger. The weight of family, love, and forgiveness pressed down on me harder than ever before. Dad lay in the hospital bed, his face pale and fragile, breathing shallowly through tubes and machines. The room smelled sterile, cold, and unfamiliar, a far cry from the warmth of family dinners or summer barbecues. Mom sat beside him, her hand gripping his with a desperate hope. I took the chair on the other side, heart pounding, emotions swirling in a storm of fear, guilt, and helplessness. The doctors explained the severity of the stroke. The damage was extensive, and the road to recovery would be long and uncertain. Words like rehabilitation, therapy, and adjustment echoed around the room. I looked at my parents, who had spent years divided by resentment and silence, and wondered how many precious moments had been lost. Laura called frequently, offering quiet support and strength. The kids sent drawings and videos to cheer Grandpa, their innocence alight in the heavy darkness. Dan stepped up too, coordinating visits and helping manage medical appointments. It was a side of him I hadn't seen before, compassionate, dependable. Through the haze of hospital visits and therapy sessions, I realized something profound. Pain, loss, and hardship had a way of breaking down walls we'd built around ourselves. In the face of vulnerability, old grudges seemed small and trivial. I reached for my father's hand one day and whispered, "We're here, Dad. We're going to get through this together." For the first time in years, our fractured family began to find a fragile unity. As Dad slowly started therapy, each small improvement felt like a victory, a raised hand, a whispered word, a flicker of recognition. Family visits became more frequent and meaningful. My parents, Dan, Laura, the kids, all came together, united by hope and a shared commitment to Dad's recovery. But even as we gathered, the past wasn't forgotten. Old wounds still surfaced in quiet moments. A sharp glance here, a hesitant word there. One evening, after a particularly difficult day in therapy, I found myself alone with Dan. "I know we've both made mistakes," I said, looking him in the eye. "But I want us to be more than just brothers who show up for a hospital stay." He nodded slowly. "Me too, Tom. Life's too short." We talked late into the night, not just about the past, but about the future, about forgiveness, respect, and the family we wanted to build. In that fragile space, something shifted. The bitterness began to melt, replaced by a cautious optimism. I realized that healing wasn't a straight path. It was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes painful. But it was possible. And with Dad fighting to regain his strength, I found a renewed determination to fight for my family. Not just for the moments we lost, but for the ones still ahead. Months passed, and Dad's progress astonished the doctors. He relearned to walk, speak, and laugh with the stubbornness that had always defined him. Each step forward was a triumph for all of us. The family gathered more often, sharing meals, stories, and memories that had been buried beneath years of silence. Our wounds didn't disappear overnight, but we learned to carry them with grace, as reminders of both pain and resilience. One evening, Laura surprised me with tickets to a theater play. "You deserve a night out," she said softly, "to celebrate everything you've been through." As we sat in the dim auditorium, watching the actors weave stories of love, betrayal, and forgiveness, I felt a quiet peace settle inside me. The journey hadn't been easy. It had been marked by heartbreak and betrayal, but also by growth and hope. I glanced at Laura's hand in mine and smiled. Family isn't perfect. It's complicated and messy, but it's also worth fighting for. And for the first time in a long time, I believed we could truly be whole again. The years that followed were not without challenges, but they were filled with more laughter, understanding, and connection than I ever thought possible. Dad's health stabilized, and his stubborn spirit returned full force. He became the family's anchor once again, sometimes gruff, sometimes tender, always present. Laura and I grew stronger, not because our marriage was perfect, but because we chose daily to rebuild trust and cherish each other's strengths and flaws. The kids flourished in this renewed environment, witnessing resilience in action. Dan and I never became best friends overnight, but we found a rhythm, an unspoken bond forged through shared pain and effort. The rivalry softened into mutual respect. And through it all, I learned the most important lesson. Sometimes the people we expect to stand by us don't. Sometimes they disappoint us deeply. But that doesn't mean we stop fighting for the family we want to be part of, whether by blood or by choice. At the next school award ceremony, I stood again on that grand stage, surrounded by colleagues and students, feeling something different. This time, my family was there, not just in body, but in heart. They had chosen to be present, and that made all the difference.